Hashtag the starving predators. First encounter. Marcus Chen adjusted his environmental suit as he stepped off the transport shuttle onto the rocky surface of Kepler 442c. The mining colony had been silent for 3 weeks, and corporate headquarters wanted answers. As the company's best troubleshooter, Marcus had volunteered for the solo reconnaissance mission, despite the warnings about hostile wildlife. The red-orange sun cast long shadows across the crystalline formations that jutted from the planet's surface like frozen lightning. Each step crunched against the mineral-rich soil, sending small clouds of glittering dust into the thin atmosphere. Marcus checked his scanner. No human life signs detected within a 5-kilometer radius of the main settlement. Colony Base Alpha, this is Investigator Chen, he spoke into his communicator. Beginning initial sweep of the perimeter. No signs of the missing colonists yet. Static crackled back through his earpiece. The communication relay satellite had been damaged in some kind of storm 2 months ago, leaving only short-range transmissions functional. Marcus was truly alone on this desolate world, 300 light-years from the nearest human settlement. As he approached the main compound, something felt wrong. The prefabricated buildings stood intact, their solar panels still gleaming and their atmospheric processors humming steadily. No signs of struggle, no blast marks, no evidence of equipment failure. It was as if the 67 colonists had simply vanished into the alien sky. Marcus entered the central habitat through the airlock, his boots echoing in the empty corridors. Emergency lighting bathed everything in an eerie blue glow. Coffee cups sat half empty on tables, personal belongings scattered as if their owners had stepped away for just a moment. In the communications center, he found logs dating up to 3 weeks ago, then, nothing. He was reviewing the final transmission records when he heard it, a low, rumbling growl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The hair on the back of his neck stood up as he slowly turned toward the sound. Through the reinforced window of the habitat, Marcus saw them. 3 creatures unlike anything in the xenobiology databases prowled around the compound's exterior. They stood nearly 3 meters tall on 4 powerful legs, their bodies covered in what looked like metallic scales that shifted color from deep purple to silver as they moved. Most striking were their heads, elongated skulls with 6 eyes arranged in pairs, each glowing with an inner fire that ranged from amber to deep red. But it was their condition that shocked Marcus the most. These magnificent predators were clearly starving. Their scales hung loose on frames that should have been powerful and muscular. Ribs showed through their sides, and their movements were careful and deliberate, conserving energy like animals on the edge of death. One of the creatures pressed its face against the window, and Marcus found himself staring into intelligent eyes filled with desperation. The being's breath fogged the transparent aluminum, and it made a sound, not quite a whimper, but something that spoke of profound suffering. Marcus had studied enough xenobiology to recognize apex predators when he saw them. These creatures were built for hunting, their sleek forms designed for speed and power. Yet here they were, reduced to scavenging around human settlements, probably drawn by the sense of food and the warmth of the habitats. His emergency training kicked in as more of the creatures appeared from behind the mining equipment. 7, then 12, then 20 of them, all showing signs of severe malnutrition. They moved with the desperate caution of animals that knew they were dying but hadn't given up hope. Marcus backed away from the window and checked his survival pack. He had enough emergency rations for a week, plus water recycling equipment and medical supplies. Standard protocol for a situation like this was clear: avoid contact with unknown alien species, especially predators, and wait for backup. But, looking at those creatures, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that waiting wasn't an option. Not for them, and possibly not for him either. If these were the apex predators of Kepler 442c, and they were starving, what did that mean for the ecosystem? What had happened here? He pulled up the colony's ecological surveys on his tablet. The local food web was complex but stable, with these creatures labeled as apex carnivore species 1 in the reports sitting at the top. They primarily hunted large herbivores that grazed on the bioluminescent moss covering the planet's northern continents. The colonists had been careful to establish their mining operation far from known hunting grounds. Yet here the predators were, clearly having traveled hundreds of kilometers from their natural habitat. The herbivore populations must have collapsed, but why? Marcus scrolled through environmental data, looking for clues. Atmospheric composition, normal. Radiation levels, within acceptable ranges. Weather patterns, stable. Then, he found it, buried in a geological survey from 5 months ago. Massive volcanic activity had been detected in the northern regions, where the herbivores lived. The ashfall and toxic gases could have devastated the plant life that formed the base of the food chain. These magnificent predators weren't just hungry, they were refugees from an ecological disaster. Outside, one of the smaller creatures collapsed. The others gathered around it, making sounds that Marcus could only describe as mournful. They weren't just pack animals, they were showing complex social behavior, caring for their weakest members even as they themselves starved. Marcus made a decision that would have earned him a reprimand from corporate safety officers. He activated the habitat's external speakers and slowly approached the airlock. The creatures immediately focused on him with all their attention, their eyes tracking his every movement. "I know you can't understand me," he said, his voice carrying across the alien landscape through the speakers. "But I can see what you're going through." The largest of the creatures, probably the pack leader, tilted its head at the sound of his voice. Its 6 eyes showed a spark of something, curiosity, perhaps even hope. Marcus returned to his pack and pulled out 3 protein bars. They weren't much, but they were dense with calories and nutrients designed to sustain a human in emergency conditions. He had no idea if alien biochemistry could process human food, but desperation sometimes required taking risks. The airlock cycled open with a soft hiss, and Marcus stepped outside. The creatures tensed, their powerful muscles coiled for action, but they didn't attack. Instead, they watched with the focused attention of animals trying to decide if this strange, bipedal being was threat, prey, or something else entirely. Marcus slowly unwrapped the first protein bar and held it out. The pack leader approached cautiously, its massive head lowering to sniff at the offering. After a moment's hesitation, it gently took the bar from his hand with teeth that could have easily severed his arm. The creature chewed thoughtfully, and Marcus held his breath. Then, its eyes brightened, and it made a sound, not quite a purr, but something that conveyed satisfaction and gratitude. The other creatures pressed closer, their desperation overriding their caution. Marcus distributed the remaining bars among the smallest and weakest of the pack. It wasn't nearly enough, but it was a start. As he watched them carefully divide the food among their members, sharing even the smallest crumbs with those too weak to stand, he realized he was witnessing something extraordinary. These weren't just mindless predators. They had complex social structures, empathy for their packmates, and, most remarkably, they were showing gratitude to an alien species that had just offered them kindness in their darkest hour. The pack leader approached Marcus again, this time lowering its great head in what unmistakably looked like a bow. When it raised its head, its eyes met Marcus's, and, in that moment, something passed between 2 very different kinds of intelligence. A recognition, perhaps. An understanding. Marcus touched his communicator, knowing he needed to report this contact to his superiors. But, first, he had work to do. These creatures were starving, and, despite every regulation in the book, he couldn't just watch them die. The question was, did he have enough food to make a difference, and, more importantly, what would be the consequences of interfering in an alien ecosystem? As he looked into those intelligent, grateful eyes, Marcus realized he was about to find out. The pack settled down around the habitat for the night, forming a protective circle. They were no longer just desperate predators looking for food, they were something else now. Allies, perhaps. Or at least, beings who remembered kindness when it was offered to them in their time of need. Marcus settled in for what he suspected would be a very interesting night, wondering if his simple act of sharing food had just changed everything on Kepler 442c. Outside, the alien stars wheeled overhead, and the grateful rumbles of sleeping predators provided an unexpected lullaby. #The bond forms, building trust. Marcus woke before dawn to find the pack leader sitting outside his window, 6 eyes glowing softly in the pre-dawn darkness. The massive creature had positioned itself like a sentinel, and Marcus realized with some amazement that it was standing guard. The others lay scattered around the habitat in defensive positions, even in their weakened state maintaining watch through the night. As he prepared his morning coffee, Marcus reviewed the night's sensor logs. 3 separate times, other predators had approached the compound, smaller, more desperate creatures drawn by the scent of the pack. Each time, the starving giants had driven them away, protecting the human habitat despite their own condition. They were keeping him safe. Marcus gathered the rest of his emergency rations and stepped outside into the crisp morning air. The pack leader rose gracefully to its feet, and the others stirred from their positions. In daylight, Marcus could see more details of their magnificent forms. Their scales weren't just metallic, they seemed to contain actual mineral deposits, probably iron and copper compounds that gave them their color-shifting properties. Evolutionary adaptation to a world rich in heavy metals. But what struck him most was their behavior. As he approached with food, the smaller and weaker members were gently moved to the front by the larger ones. The pack leader, despite being clearly the most dominant, waited until all others had been fed before taking anything for itself. It was a social structure built on care and sacrifice, not just dominance. "I wish I had more for you," Marcus said, distributing his remaining protein bars. "But maybe we can find another solution." The pack leader approached him as he finished feeding the others. Instead of waiting for food, the creature did something unexpected. It pressed its great head against Marcus's shoulder and rumbled softly. The sound resonated through his bones, and he realized it was trying to communicate something beyond hunger. Trust. Marcus reached up cautiously and touched the creature's scaled hide. It was warm, and he could feel the powerful muscles beneath. The creature leaned into his touch, and several of the others approached, surrounding Marcus in a circle of warmth and gratitude. His communicator crackled to life. "Chen, this is base command. Status report." Marcus looked around at the creatures surrounding him, knowing that standard protocol would label this situation as a hostile alien contact. The pack would be classified as a threat, and military intervention would follow. He made a choice that went against every regulation in the book. "Base command, this is Chen. Investigating possible equipment failures in the colony. Need more time to assess situation. Request extension of silence protocol. Roger, Chen. Approved for additional 72 hours. Report any emergencies immediately." Marcus turned off his communicator and looked at the pack leader. "Looks like we have 3 days to figure this out together." The next few hours transformed Marcus's understanding of these remarkable beings. As they explored the colony together, the creatures showed him things his scanners had missed. The pack leader guided him to a section of the mining operation where the ground had collapsed, revealing a vast network of underground tunnels. The missing colonists' equipment was scattered throughout the caverns, but there were no remains, just empty clothes and personal effects. But it wasn't the colonists that fascinated Marcus. It was what the tunnels contained. Deep in the cavern system, bioluminescent fungi covered the walls in patterns that seemed almost deliberately arranged. The creatures moved through these spaces with obvious familiarity, leading Marcus to chambers where the fungal growth was thickest. As his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he began to see what looked like cultivation. The fungi weren't growing randomly. They had been tended, encouraged to grow in specific patterns that maximized their spread and health. Someone had been farming down here, creating a sustainable food source in the depths of the planet. The pack leader watched Marcus's growing understanding and rumbled approvingly. Then, it did something that sent chills down his spine. It approached one of the fungal walls and carefully harvested a portion, offering it to him. Marcus analyzed the sample with his portable scanner. The fungus was rich in proteins and complex carbohydrates, perfectly balanced for the nutritional needs of the planet's ecosystems. It would sustain both the herbivores and the predators through the ecological disaster above. But the growth was too organized, too intentional to be natural. Someone had been farming this. Someone intelligent. Someone who understood agriculture and ecology well enough to create a backup food system for an entire planet's worth of species. The colonists. Marcus followed the creatures deeper into the tunnel system, his understanding growing with each chamber they revealed. The missing humans hadn't been killed or taken, they had transformed this place into something magnificent. Underground farms, atmospheric processors, water reclamation systems. They had created a sustainable ecosystem that could support the planet's life through the volcanic winter above. And they had invited the starving predators to join them. In the deepest chamber, Marcus found them. 67 human colonists working alongside hundreds of local species, herbivores, smaller predators, even insect-like creatures that tended to the fungal gardens with careful precision. They looked up as Marcus entered, their faces showing a mixture of surprise and welcome. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the colony's xenobiologist, approached him with a smile.
Marcus Chen, corporate troubleshooter. I remember your file. What took you so long to find us?
What is this place? Marcus gestured at the impossible scene around him. This is what happens when humans stop trying to impose their will on alien worlds and start trying to understand them instead, Dr. Martinez replied.
The volcanic eruption wasn't just a disaster, it was a test.
These creatures, the ones you've been feeding, they're not just predators. They're the planet's caretakers. She led Marcus to an observation area where he could see the full scope of the underground ecosystem.
The pack you met, they're called the Veltar in the local ecosystem's chemical language. They're not just apex predators, they're ecological engineers.
They've been managing this planet's biosphere for thousands of years, preparing for exactly this kind of disaster. Marcus watched as his pack leader directed smaller creatures in expanding a fungal growing area. The careful, intelligent way it moved made perfect sense now.
They were testing us? The volcanic eruption happens every few centuries. It's part of the planet's natural cycle.
The Veltar have underground systems throughout the continents, ready to support life during the dark periods. But they'd never encountered an alien species before.
They needed to know if humans could be trusted with their world.
Dr. Martinez pointed to a group of human children playing with young Veltar in a nearby chamber.
Your pack leader is called Ashtara.
She was chosen specifically to approach the surface and test human reactions. When you shared your food with her pack, you passed the first test.
When you chose not to report their presence to corporate, you passed the second. Marcus felt overwhelmed.
The missing colonists' reports were designed to bring exactly the right kind of human here. Someone who would investigate, someone who wouldn't immediately call for military backup, someone who might show compassion to alien life.
Dr. Martinez smiled. Corporate thinks we're missing. In reality, we found something far more valuable than any mineral deposit.
A new way of living, Marcus whispered, watching human and alien children play together in the bioluminescent light. The Veltar are offering us partnership, Marcus.
True partnership.
They'll share their ecological knowledge, their sustainable technologies, their understanding of how to live in harmony with planetary systems. In return, they want to learn from us our adaptability, our innovation, our ability to find solutions to complex problems. Marcus felt Ashtara approach from behind, her massive form moving silently over the soft fungal floor. She lowered her great head and rumbled softly, and somehow he understood what she was offering. A choice. He could return to the surface, report the colony as lost, and let corporate write off Kepler 442c as another failed venture. Or he could stay and help build something unprecedented, a truly cooperative society between human and alien intelligence. Marcus touched his communicator one last time.
Base Command, this is Chen. Colony equipment appears to have suffered catastrophic failure. No survivors detected. Recommend marking this system as unsuitable for human habitation.
He powered down the device and handed it to Dr. Martinez, who smiled and passed it to one of the younger Veltar to add to their collection of human artifacts.
Welcome to the future, Marcus, she said. I think you're going to like it here.
As if in response to her words, the chamber filled with the harmonic rumbling of dozens of Veltar voices, joined by human laughter and the chittering songs of the smaller creatures. It was the sound of species learning to sing together, creating something beautiful from their differences rather than their similarities. Marcus realized that his simple act of sharing food with starving predators had indeed changed everything, not just for the Veltar, not just for the colonists, but for what it meant to be human among the stars. #The New Alliance, a changed future. 6 months later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the orbital station that had once been a corporate mining platform. Below, Kepler 442c gleamed like a jewel against the starfield, its surface now showing the green glow of recovered vegetation as the volcanic ash cleared from the atmosphere. But the real changes weren't visible from orbit.
Still can't believe they sent an entire diplomatic fleet, Dr. Martinez said, joining him at the viewing port. 12 ships, 3 ambassadors, and enough military escort to conquer a small moon. All because one troubleshooter went missing. Marcus smiled, watching a transport shuttle rise from the planet's surface. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see the distinctive silhouettes of both human and Veltar passengers. They're about to get the surprise of their lives. The lead diplomatic vessel, UES Harmony, had arrived 3 days ago with Ambassador Jennifer Walsh aboard. She'd come expecting to investigate the loss of a mining colony and possibly establish first contact with a hostile alien species. Instead, she'd found something that challenged every assumption about human expansion into space. The airlock chimed softly as the transport docked. Ambassador Walsh stepped through first, her diplomatic corps uniform immaculate despite the 3-day cultural immersion program she'd just completed on the surface. Behind her came Ashtara, moving with fluid grace despite the station's artificial gravity being designed for human physiology. The Veltar had grown magnificent in the months since the ecological restoration began. Her scales now rippled with health, shifting from deep emerald to silver as she moved. But, more than her physical recovery, it was her bearing that impressed visitors. She carried herself with the confidence of a being who knew her people had found trusted allies among the stars. Ambassador, Marcus nodded formally, then broke into a grin. How was your first night in a fungal chamber? Surprisingly comfortable, Walsh admitted. Though I think I'll be processing what I've learned for months to come. She gestured to Ashtara, who had positioned herself beside the observation window. The Veltar understanding of ecological engineering is centuries ahead of our best theoretical models. Through the translation device that Veltar biotechnology had made possible, a symbiotic organism that facilitated direct neural communication between species, Ashtara's thoughts came clearly to the assembled humans. Your people think in terms of individual advantage. Ours thinks in terms of systemic harmony. Together, we discover solutions neither could achieve alone. Marcus had been working with the translation organisms for months now, but the elegant complexity of Veltar thought patterns still amazed him. They didn't just communicate ideas, they shared emotional contexts, sensory experiences, and conceptual frameworks that expanded human understanding in unexpected ways. The technology demonstrations were particularly impressive, Walsh continued. The bioarchitectural systems, the closed-loop resource cycling, the predictive ecological modeling, were looking at advances that could revolutionize human space habitation. Dr. Martinez pulled up a holographic display showing the underground city that had grown beneath Kepler 442c's surface. This is just the beginning. The Veltar have been refining these techniques for millennia. They can adapt their cities to any planetary environment, gas giants, ice worlds, even asteroid habitats. They're offering to teach us. In exchange for something we cannot create ourselves, Ashtara added, her 6 eyes focusing on Ambassador Walsh. Your people's gift for innovation, for seeing possibilities where we see only established patterns. Your adaptability complements our stability, Walsh nodded slowly. The applications are staggering. Sustainable colonies that work with planetary ecosystems instead of against them. Closed-loop resource systems that could support human populations indefinitely. Predictive environmental management that prevents ecological disasters before they occur. Marcus touched the observation window, watching another transport launch from the surface. This one carried a mixed crew of human and Veltar engineers heading to the outer system to begin construction of the first joint research station. But that's not even the most important part. What do you mean? Walsh asked. Show her the long-range scans, Dr. Martinez said quietly. Marcus activated the station's main display, showing a star map that extended far beyond the local system. Red markers indicated human colonies that had gone silent in the past year, mining operations, research stations, even established settlements that had stopped responding to communication attempts. We're not the only ones who've encountered ecological disasters, Marcus explained. Or the only ones who've made contact with local species. The pattern is spreading throughout human space, but most of our people are treating it as separate, unrelated incidents. Ashtara moved closer to the display, her scaled fingers tracing the pattern of failed colonies. Your species expands too quickly, without understanding the systems you enter. Many worlds have their own guardians, their own custodial species.
Most of your people meet them as we met you, with both sides desperate and afraid at *, but, unlike our first contact, most of these encounters are ending badly, Dr. Martinez added.
Military responses, xenocide protocols, ecological warfare.
Entire planetary biospheres being destroyed because humans and local species can't find common ground.
Ambassador Walsh studied the display with growing understanding.
You're saying that what happened here, Marcus sharing his food, the choice to trust rather than fight, that could be a template for changing how humanity expands into space?
More than a template, Ashtara responded. A necessity.
Your people face a choice between partnership and isolation. The custodial species throughout this galaxy have been watching your expansion, measuring your responses to contact. What happens here will determine whether humanity is welcomed among the greater community of intelligence, or treated as an invasive species to be contained. Marcus felt the weight of that revelation. The simple act of offering protein bars to starving predators had been the first move in a much larger game, one that would determine humanity's future among the stars. The Veltar have already sent communications to their network, Dr. Martinez explained.
There's a loose confederation of custodial species throughout this arm of the galaxy.
They share information about emerging intelligences, evaluate their potential for integration or management. Walsh paled slightly.
Management? Containment, Marcus clarified.
Species that prove incompatible with galactic ecosystem stability get isolated within their home systems until they either adapt or fade away. But that is not the path we choose for your people, Ashtara assured them.
You have shown that humans can learn, can choose cooperation over conquest.
Marcus's choice to trust hungry strangers instead of calling for weapons, this proves your people have wisdom beneath their aggression. The ambassador turned back to the observation window, watching the planet below.
What exactly are you proposing?
A new model for human expansion, Marcus said. Instead of corporate mining operations and military surveys, we send small teams like mine, people trained in xenobiology, ecology, and diplomacy. When we find inhabited worlds, we establish contact based on mutual benefit instead of resource extraction.
Dr. Martinez activated another display showing preliminary designs for joint human Veltar ships.
The Veltar are offering to share their biotechnology and ecological expertise. In return, we share our adaptability, our innovation, our ability to solve problems in unconventional ways. Together, we can offer other species something they've never had: a partnership with a truly spacefaring civilization. Your people's greatest strength is not your technology or your weapons, Ashtara observed. It is your capacity for growth, for becoming more than what you were. This can inspire other species to grow as well, to reach beyond their established patterns. Ambassador Walsh was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications.
Finally, she spoke. This would require completely restructuring our approach to space expansion.
Corporate interests, military doctrines, resource allocation, everything would have to change.
Everything has to change anyway, Marcus pointed out. The old model isn't working. We're running into resistance from established ecosystems throughout human space.
We can either adapt our approach or find ourselves confined to a handful of dead worlds while the rest of the galaxy moves forward without us.
Walsh activated her personal communicator.
I need to speak with Earth Command immediately.
This is going to revolutionize human space policy.
As the ambassador began her urgent communications with human leadership, Marcus found himself alone with Ashtara at the observation window. The Veltar's thoughts came to him without the translation organism. After months of partnership, they had developed their own form of communication. You are concerned about your people's reaction, she observed.
Change is hard for humans, Marcus admitted. Especially when it means admitting that our current approach is fundamentally flawed.
A lot of people have invested their lives and careers in the old model of expansion. But you are not giving up hope, Marcus smiled, watching the mixed crews working together on the planet below.
How can I? Look what happened when one human chose to share food with hungry strangers.
If that small act of kindness could lead to all this, imagine what humanity could accomplish if we made cooperation our default response instead of competition.
This is why the custodial network chose to trust your species, Ashtara replied.
Not because you are perfect, but because you are capable of becoming better than you are. This is a rare gift among intelligent species. 6 months ago, Marcus had been a corporate troubleshooter investigating a missing mining colony. Today, he was helping to design a new future for human civilization among the stars. All because he had chosen to offer food to starving predators instead of calling for backup. As he watched the diplomatic fleet begin its journey back to Earth, carrying samples of Veltar biotechnology, recordings of their ecological wisdom, and proof that cooperation between species was not just possible but necessary, Marcus reflected on how often the most important changes began with the smallest acts of kindness. The galaxy was vast and full of intelligence waiting to be discovered. Humanity's choice was simple: they could meet that intelligence with weapons and exploitation, or with open hands and generous hearts. Marcus touched the observation window one last time before turning to help prepare for the next transport of eager volunteers heading to the surface. Outside, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, and, somewhere among them, other species were watching to see which choice humanity would make. The predators were no longer starving. The question now was whether the rest of the galaxy would be fed by human wisdom, or forced to defend themselves against human hunger. The answer to that question would be written in the choices made by every human who ventured forth into the cosmos, carrying with them the memory of what could happen when strangers chose trust over fear, cooperation over conquest, and kindness over indifference. Marcus smiled as he headed to the shuttle bay. There were other worlds to explore, other species to meet, and other chances to prove that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in taking what they wanted, but in sharing what they had. The future stretched out before them, vast and full of possibilities.